From the very beginning, humans have been continuously trying to know and understand the mystery of the universe around them. They are trying to know the relationship with the physical world on one side and social world on the other side. This requires strong observation, critical study and deep thinking. It is philosophy which has been very useful and helpful to know the nature of humans, their origin and relationship with nature, their aspirations and the tools they use to achieve their aims. Life and philosophy are so closely related that it is said that if there is life, there would be some philosophy of it also. The function of philosophy is to refine the interests of an individual. With this, it studies the views of people. The difference in the views of people are quite natural. We notice greater diversity in the system of education as the years passes, as education varies from time to time and place to place. Learned teachers and thinkers have been contributing new views on education with improved and modified techniques. They have been throwing new light on the theory and practice of education and showing various possibilities in this field, which is very important for human welfare. Many eminent personalities have worked in this field and have explored fresh approaches in the field of teaching and learning. Based on their knowledge, experience and experimentation, they have been giving guidance and inspiring ideas for the benefit of the teacher. In this unit, you will study the relationship between philosophy and education. Also read about the contributions towards education by visionaries. The word philosophy is derived from two Greek words, philos, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. Therefore, the word philosophy means love of wisdom or love of truth. Philosophy is an intellectual exercise based on reason. It studies the nature of reality, the nature of knowledge and the nature of values. The system of education in any country is influenced by the philosophy of its own nation. Dr. Radhakrishna has defined philosophy as critical exposition of reality. It is not merely a bookish knowledge, but the result of logical thinking and contemplation. An understanding of the philosophical basis helps the educationist to decide the objectives, design learning outcomes, select appropriate methods of teaching, prepare the curriculum and take other important decisions in education. Philosophy is wisdom and it is related to education. Philosophy directs different things in life. Similarly, it directs education also. It is philosophy which coordinates the activities of the individual, including education. Philosophy is the study of general and fundamental problems, such as those connected with reality, existence, knowledge, values, reason, mind and language. Traditionally, philosophy refers to a set of opinions, customs, beliefs and ideas about the nature of reality, truth and values. Philosophy is distinguished from other ways of addressing such problems by its critical, generally systematic approach and its reliance on rational argument. In more casual speech, by extension, philosophy can refer to the most basic beliefs, concepts and attitudes of an individual or group. All cultures, be they prehistoric, medieval or modern, eastern, western, religious or secular, have had their own unique schools of philosophy. Such Theories have grown from different premises and approaches, examples of which include but are not limited to rationalism. Theories arrived at through logic. Empirism. Theories arrived at through observation and even through leaps of faith, hope and inheritance such as the supernaturalist philosophies and religions. According to the Western philosophers, philosophy is a method of analysis, clarification and criticism. The Indian thinkers of ancient times viewed philosophy as a practical necessity that needed to be cultivated in order to understand how life can be best led. It became a custom for Indian writers to explain the beginning of philosophical works, how it serves human ends. Studies have shown that there was a great deal of association between Greek and Indian philosophy during the era of Hellenistic expansion. Indian philosophy is distinctive in its application of analytical rigor to metaphysical problems and goes into very precious detail about the nature of reality. The structure and function of the human psyche and the relationship between the two have important implications for human salvation. Philosophy deals with the question of reality, knowledge and value. It is theoretical and also practical. It is related to the theoretical questions like what is life, what is value, where did man come from, where does he go. It is related to practical questions like what kind of life is worth living. The following ideas will help us to develop the concept of philosophy. Philosophy is a personal attitude towards life and universe. Philosophy is a method of reflective thinking and reasoned inquiry. Philosophy is an attempt to gain a view of the whole. Philosophy is the logical analysis of language and clarification of the meaning of words and concepts. Philosophy is a group of problems as well as theories about the solution of these problems. Philosophy is related to educational theories and provides suitable solutions to educational problems. By providing some guidelines, philosophy directs education. Philosophy provides us answers and gives directions to the educational ideas, beliefs and problems. For the analysis of educational principles, philosophy is helpful and essential. As Dr. S. Radhakrishnan said, it is logical inquiry into the nature of reality. Philosophy and education are closely related and are interdependent. Philosophy gives suitable answers to educational problems. A sound philosophy of education is based on adequate philosophy of life. In fact, the objectives of education are a result of philosophy. Philosophy and education walk hand in hand. In this relationship, philosophy and education are reconstructive. They give and take flow of thought and action from each other. Philosophy points out the way to be followed by education. For example, while modifying a child's behavior, the philosophy solves the questions like in which direction modification should be carried, what should be the standards and values to strive for. Philosophy thus deals with the ends and education with the means to achieve those ends. Education is like a laboratory in which philosophical theories and speculations are tested and made concrete. Philosophy is wisdom. Education transmits that wisdom from one generation to the other. In reality, Philosophy is the theory of education. Philosophy formulates the method and education its process. Philosophy gives ideals, values and principles. Education works out these ideals, values and principles. Education is the best means for the propagation of philosophy. Ross has summed up this point by quoting, "Philosophy and education are two sides of the coin. The former is the contemplative, while the latter is the active side." Education then, as Adam has said, is the dynamic side of philosophy. Philosophy sets the goal of life and education provides the means for the achievement of goals. All great philosophers of the world have also been great educators. The philosophers like Gandhi, Aurobindo, Plato, Dewey and Socrates have been great educationists. They reflected their philosophical views in their educational systems. Philosophy determines all the broad aspects of education. It is philosophy that provides aims to education. These aims determine the curriculum, the methods of teaching and techniques, the textbooks, the problems of school organization, concept of school discipline and also the role of the teacher. In the different schools of philosophy such as idealism, naturalism and pragmatism, which you will study in the subsequent sections. The aims, curriculum, methods, discipline are varied. Philosophy is theoretical and education is practical, and thus philosophy is closely related to education. Thus, as far as we need aims of education, philosophy will continue influencing and determining both the matter and methods of education. A few quotations listed below by great thinkers will establish the relation between philosophy and education. John Dewey endorses the viewpoint of Ross when he says philosophy is the theory of education in its most general phase. Spencer goes a step ahead and says true education is practicable only to true philosophers. Gentile describes these views like this: education without philosophy would mean a failure to understand the precise nature of education. Taking these views into consideration, we can sum up the relationship between philosophy and education as philosophy determines the actual destination towards which education has to progress. Philosophy determines the various aspects of education like aims of education, curriculum, methods of teaching, discipline and role of the teacher. Let us now study each of these in detail. The aims of education are related to the aims of life, and the aims of life are creations of the philosophy of certain time. Hence, the aims of education are determined according to the aims and philosophy of life. Education tries to achieve aim of life as goals of education, and these aims of life are determined by the philosophy of life prevalent at the time. Different philosophers, based on their own thinking, considering the demands of the society of their times, have formulated different aims of life. Further, education has always tried to achieve those aims as different goals of education. Thus, as aims of life change, aims of education also change accordingly. It is philosophy which determines whether the aim of education should be intellectual or moral, useful or liberal, individual or social. Philosophy is one of the three foundations of curriculum, the other two being psychology and sociology. Philosophy determines the aims and objectives of education. So, also it determines the structure of the curriculum. Philosophy mainly influences the choice of subjects to be included in the curriculum. It tells us why particular subject should be taught and it benefits to the learner. The philosophy of a country at a particular time determines the curriculum of subjects, activities and experiences. Accordingly, the curriculum is prepared to meet the emerging demands of the society at a particular time. Philosophy is closely related to the methods of teaching. Changing philosophies change the methods of teaching. Hence, different schools of philosophy prescribe different methods of teaching. According to Professor Saxena, philosophy is the way of thinking and way of working. As such, these two factors determine the nature, style and actual operation of methods of teaching. Below are some different philosophies which advocate different approaches of teaching. Education should be child-centric and the teacher to use such methods to recognize the innate abilities of children. This approach supports Dalton plan, heuristic and Montessori methods. The children must have a free environment to grow. Some philosophers stand for non-intervention by the teacher. The children should have complete freedom and an appropriate environment for their development to full set extent. Project method, which is more practical and experimental. Question answer, discussion and lecture method for the overall development of a child's personality. The nature of discipline too is determined by the philosophy. For example, naturalism stands for freedom of the child. Idealism relies much on the personality of the teacher for maintenance of discipline. Pragmatism does not believe in imposing external discipline. The idealistic viewpoint that strict discipline is necessary to make the child a good citizen is refuted by the pragmatists. They also favor freedom. Philosophy has a great influence on the teacher both in the area of thinking and behaving. A teacher is not a teacher alone, but is a philosopher too. According to Plato, a philosopher is one who has a taste for every sort of knowledge, one who is curious to learn and is never satisfied. Teachers are expected to influence the children with their philosophy. They should be conscious about the needs of the children and the society and work towards meeting those needs. The belief, ideology, looks and conduct of teachers has a profound influence on the development of the children. Therefore, it is important for teachers to possess proper moral and spiritual values. There are general frameworks which provide the root or base from which the various educational philosophies are derived. These philosophical schools of thought are applicable to education. They are idealism, naturalism, pragmatism and constructivism. We shall learn about these philosophical schools in detail. Plato, Pestalozzi and Froebel introduced the idealism of education. Idealism is born out of Plato's theory of ideas. According to this doctrine, the ultimate supremacy of ideas, according to idealism, reality is found in man's mind rather than in his physical environment. Propagates self-realization of personality in a social and cultural environment. Education is to develop the child mentally, morally and above all spiritually. Idealists give more importance to thoughts, feelings, ideals and values than to the child and related activities. They firmly hold that curriculum should be concerned with the whole humanity. Questioning, discussion and lecturing are very important methods of teaching. Froebel insisted play-way method. Aristotle advocated inductive deductive method. Idealists are of the opinion that any and every method may be employed to realize the ideals set and determined before. Idealists advocated the use of textbooks as a source of knowledge. The place of teacher in idealism is very high. They believe that proper manipulation of the teaching process is impossible without the teacher. Teacher guides and directs the child with love, affection and sympathy. The ideal teacher would be a guide and philosopher also for the children. Rousseau is known to be the founder of naturalism. Aristotle, Comte, Bacon, Hobbes, Huxley, Spencer and Lamarck are the supporters of naturalism. Naturalism is associated with natural self or real self. For naturalists, nature is everything and behind everything there is nature. Naturalists do not believe in spiritual development and advocate that humans should investigate the truth of nature through science. Naturalism has mainly three forms. Naturalism of physical sciences tries to explain the experiences in light of natural laws which are external in nature. Mechanicalism, another form of naturalism, regards man as a mere machine. Biological naturalism tries to explain man as a product of evolution and as the highest creative who inherits the racial past consisting of natural instincts and emotions. Self-expression is the aim of education. Education should be the redirection and coordination of instincts of man to achieve those goals which have individual and social value. The child's activities and natural interests get priority in the curriculum. Curriculum should consist of subjects which reflect the instinctive tendencies, natural interests, natural activities, individual differences. Direct experience with nature, things and men is the keynote of instructions according to naturalist. All knowledge must emerge out of actual situation and experience. Nature is the supreme teacher. Teacher should not interfere with the activities of the children or nor provide any ideals. He has to provide suitable opportunities to create conditions which are encouraging to the natural development of the child. Pragmatism is human centric, according to which man's own experiences are the centers of reality and truth. Therefore, it also called humanism. Constructivism is basically a theory based on observation and scientific study about how people learn. Let us learn more about these two schools of philosophies in detail. William James, John Dewey, Silla and Kilpatrick are the chief exponents of pragmatism. It emphasizes the action rather than the thought. It also locates identities or traces values in the human experience. It emphasizes that the aims of human life always change with changing times, places and circumstances. In the words of Ross, education must create new values and the main task of educator are to put the learner into a position to develop values for himself. Pragmatists believe that man is primarily a biological and social organism. The aim of education should be to transmit the social background and outlook of the community to the rising generation. Pragmatism gives several criteria for curriculum construction. Utility. The school must provide experience that are useful to the child, hence the curriculum should include subjects that will impart knowledge, hygiene, physical training, history and geography, mathematics, science, domestic science for girls and agricultural science for boys. The curriculum is based on the principle of the child's occupation, activities and experiences. The subjects should be closely interlinked and correlated to form right concepts and proper understandings in children. The first principle of the pragmatic method is to establish a relation with the life of the child, his desires and purposes, his interests and inclinations. The second principle of pragmatism in educational method is learning by doing or learning through one's experience. Kilpatrick, follower of John Dewey, formulated a solid and practical method of teaching, that is project method. A project is a wholehearted, purposeful activity proceeding in a social environment. This method is active and dynamic in nature, in which the child learns by his own activities and experiences. The most important responsibility of a teacher is to guide the young children through complexities of life. Teacher has to observe, plan and encourage the activities of the students and provide suitable environment and experiences. He is a friend, a philosopher and a guide. Constructivism is a theory to explain how knowledge is constructed in the human being when information comes into contact with existing knowledge that had been developed by experiences. Von Glasersfeld describes constructivism as a theory of knowledge with roots in philosophy, psychology and cybernetics. Knowledge should be created in order to adapt to the world. Education should make a child creative and innovative through analysis, conceptualization and synthesis of prior experience to create new knowledge. Discovery, hands-on, experimental, collaborative, project-based and task-based learning are the basis teaching and learning on constructivism. Instructors have to adapt to the role of facilitators and not teachers. A teacher gives an informative lecture that covers the subject matter, whereas a facilitator helps the learner to get their own understanding of the content and become effective thinker. Philosophy provides us answers and gives directions to educational ideas, beliefs and problems. By providing some guidelines, philosophy directs education. Further, philosophy is helpful and essential for the analysis of educational principles. Philosophy and education are closely related. Philosophy depicts the path to be followed by education. Philosophy is wisdom and education transmits this wisdom from one generation to the other. Philosophy formulates the methods, education its process. Philosophy gives ideas, values and principles. Education works out these ideas, values and principles. It is philosophy that provides aims to education. These aims determine the curriculum, methods of teaching and techniques, textbooks, concept of school, discipline and also the role of the teacher. Idealism, naturalism, pragmatism and constructivism are the general frameworks which provide the root or base from which the various educational philosophies are derived. In these different schools of philosophy, idealism, naturalism, pragmatism, constructivism, the aims, curriculum, method and discipline are varied. To recapitulate, as long as we need aims of education, philosophy will continue influencing and determining both the matter and method of education.